JayEmm on Cars is sponsored by Car Vertical. With just a registration number, or even better, a VIN, Car Vertical will search over 20 European databases to find out whether any car you're looking at has a hidden past. They can see if a vehicle was used as a taxi, stolen, suffered fire damage, or involved in a crash, even when it wasn't written off, so could pass other checks. Car Vertical is now an essential tool in my car buying kit, putting all the information I need to know together in one easy-to-read report. Even better, if you follow the link in the description down below, you'll get 10% off. A big thank you to them for being today's sponsor.
Hello everybody. It would appear that no matter what we do, Lotus and myself will be forever intertwined. Picking up a Lotus was the very first video ever released on this channel, and for the first 3 years I was rather heavily involved with the company and its products. We had a somewhat acrimonious divorce a couple of years ago, but that hasn't dampened my enthusiasm for the company's many fabulous products, and to this day, whenever I get an email in my inbox offering me a drive of a Lotus, I will almost always say yes. This last month I've been blessed with drives of several very cool Lotus cars, one being an Esprit S2, the second being the fabulous Lotus Europa Special, a real surprise that, and today I am back in an Elise, more specifically a Series 1 Lotus Elise Sport 160. There are a couple of ways to look at the Elise. You could see it how I generally do, which is that they're all broadly the same sort of thing, and they're all generally quite wonderful at being driven, but quite bad at living with. Or you could view these from a more analytical viewpoint and go, yes, okay, there are many large similarities, but there are also some quite subtle differences that geeks like me can be quite important. When you begin to discuss the Elise, you'll very quickly get down to a debate as to which one is actually the most desirable. For a very long time, I was somewhat controversial in my opinion that the S1 was a car I had no interest in. There were a few reasons for that. Firstly, never really keen on the looks. It seemed to me a little bit more beach buggy than sports car. Even simple things like the gearbox being a 5-speed and with a weird little gear lever I didn't like, the little Peugeot 205 buttons here seemed a little bit naff even by Lotus standards, and the needlessly complicated roof. These are all things that put me off owning a Series 1. It's for that reason that I bought myself a few years ago a Series 2 111R. That car is also considered a high point by many in the Elise lineage, being powered by a screaming 1.8 litre 190 horsepower Toyota engine with a crazy lust for revs. But if I'm being entirely honest, I think I bought the wrong car, because it's only when you are absolutely thrashing the pants off it that it really come alive. The rest of the time it was something of a chore. The later Series 3 cars I generally quite enjoy. They are much better built, I like the looks of them, and the engine choices actually are fairly reasonable. You've got a bit of a mix of everything. However, they're quite expensive. Even now, if you want a Series 3 Elise, especially a later one, you're still going to be parting with about 40-odd thousand pounds. But then early Elises aren't really dramatically cheaper either. You're still going to pay about 15 to 20k for a modest Series 1. There are, of course, always examples, though, that will be more desirable. And amongst the road-going Series 1 Elises, the Sport 160 is regarded as one of the best. No, it wasn't the most powerful Series 1 Elise ever made. That honour went instead to the 190 horsepower VHPD-powered car with a very extreme version of the Rover K-Series engine. Technically speaking, though, they were not road-legal cars, but a lot of them did find their way out onto the public roads. In fact, the first batch of Sport 160s were actually put out using SVA, that's single vehicle approval, so each one had to be individually tested before it could be sold. Those did have the full 160 horsepower. The car was then later properly type approved, so Lotus could sell loads of them, and these ones had allegedly a little bit less. However, this one's been on a dyno and it produces about 165 horsepower, which is adequate in something that still weighs well under 800 kilos. People will often cite a weight figure beginning with a 6 for the early Elise, but the fact is that was never ever the case. Early ones probably about 720, 730 kilos, these closer to about 770. That's still a flyweight though, that's really properly light. And that means that quite an exciting thing. This one's been brought to me by its kind owner, Andrew Leng, who I've known for quite a while. The thing with a Lotus, particularly an Elise, is that they don't really come with much. This one doesn't have lecky windows, it doesn't have air conditioning, it doesn't have a metal folding hardtop, it doesn't really even have proper carpets. But what you do get with every single Lotus out there is a free story. Allow me now to tell you this car's. The Sport 160 came out in 2000 at the tail end of the original Elise's production run. It's very easy to forget, but this car wasn't actually designed to last all that long. It came out in 96, and by 2001 it was over. It's the Elise's successors which then lasted another 2 decades in one form or another, with the chassis actually being broadly the same for both S2 and S3. Andrew bought this car nearly new and had a very, very good time in it, but one of the issues with the S1 is that they do leak. No matter how hard you try and no matter how good your car is, this top, when it's on, is absolutely not waterproof. It's merely a cover. In fact, you can get a shower cap for these if you think the car's going to suffer any sort of proper rainfall. This wasn't an issue though, because Andrew had somewhere to store it, but then his situation changed and he no longer did, so the car had to go. And he sold it to a chap and said, look, if ever you are going to be getting rid of it, let me know, will you, because I may have it back. 15 years later, Andrew had a number of other different cars, including a McLaren 570, but he decided that the Series 1 Elise was an itch that once again needed scratching. He decided, because a Sport 160 is what he'd had previously, that was the only way he was going to be able to satisfy his cravings. So he began the hunt looking at cars all over the country. And then one day, a phone call came through from a dealer and he said, Andrew, I've got a gentleman who wants to sell his Sport 160 and apparently I've got to phone you first. Yep. Believe it or not only had this car been in one man's care for a decade and a half, but he'd also stayed true to his word and made sure that Andrew had first refusal on this. As you can probably tell, he took the car back and has now been enjoying it for the last year or so. And I can say, honestly, every time I get back in one of these, I'm reminded of just how brilliant they are. Only the other day, my friend Jack from number 27 took out his Frankenlease and compared it with my Honda S2000, and you know what? I will bear no ill will to anybody who says that as a driving machine, the Elise is by far the Honda's superior, because it is. It's absolutely sensational. The two, of course, are very different things. This has almost no interior. The Honda's is actually quite nice. It has an electric folding roof, which is lovely, and a reasonably sized boot too. It does have a bit more grunt, officially 240 horsepower versus this car's 160, but there is no way that's enough to make up for the half-a-ton weight differential. Yep, 770 odd kilos plays 1,250 in the S2000. And the result is remarkable. Even in a car park, the Elise's steering is beautiful, light, so I mean, look, you can just drive it with your fingertips, and actually, that's the best way to drive an Elise. The thing moves around in your hands so brilliantly, and you just know exactly what's going on. You don't have to drive this hard to enjoy it, but if you do want to drive it hard, it's amazing. At the time of filming this, I haven't yet released my video announcing that I want to buy a classic car at some point in time. Yet even still, I'm constantly asked, will I ever buy another Lotus? And I'll be perfectly honest, Yeah, I will. A lot of people have asked me if I'd have an Emira, and the fact is, I don't want one of those for very many reasons. Maybe one day I will have one, never say never and all that. But if I'm being truthful, I've got cars that will do the sort of Emira thing better than the Emira. I've still got a soft spot for the Evora. I do generally have a rule that I will try not to repeat any car that I've owned. I made an exception with the 1 Series, and that wasn't a terrible idea, and it's a very different kind of car. It's a daily rather than something special. But the Elise that I had, I felt wasn't perhaps the right one for me, so having another Elise is not something I'm going to rule out. The tricky bit, though, is working out which I should have. As I've mentioned, there are a lot of reasons why previously I've always written off a Series 1, but now I feel like it's something that I would actually consider. I've not even got this car beyond about 3,500, 4,000 RPM, and it's just an utter and total delight. Yes, if I had to do miles in it, it would be really, really winding me up. It's not a perfect thing at all. The brake pedal is not the nicest to use, actually. You do really need to lean on it a bit more than you would think, and actually brakes have always been a bit of an Elise issue, not just because they haven't been powerful enough, but because the car is so light, that front end can be really, really easily overloaded. But that's fine, you just drive to the speed of the road, and then it becomes less about making progress and more about enjoying the progress that you're making. The gearbox actually is really quite nice. It's a shame it's got only the 5 ratios, but for this kind of stuff, it's not a problem. Pretty nippy, this thing. The brakes are really not very good. The engine's lovely, though. I saw another 160 yesterday. My friend Dominic hosted a bit of an Elise party, and that was a very, very cammy little so-and-so. It sounded like it had been 3 rotor swapped, you know. See, the problem I have is that being a sort of bit of a petrol head geek and doing the job that I do, I wind up often being a bit of a hypocrite, because I'll tell anyone else, look, just buy any Elise, they're all brilliant. But then when it comes to trying to find one for myself, I do wind up going, oh, but I didn't want the base one because it's only 118 horsepower, and maybe then I want a Sport 135, but then there's a Sport 160, and then I'd only want one in the right colour, and this looks quite nice in black, starlight black I think it might be. It's got a lot of grey in it, so it's actually more interesting in the flesh than probably comes across in video. I would want one in a bright colour. One of the other reasons I would now consider a Series 1 is because I do have some indoor storage, so the fact that these things are not waterproof is no longer an issue. This is the kind of road that the Elise is born for, really, and it's so well suited to it. It's just a joy. There's no room in here either. I mean, putting 2 people in this car, especially 2 grown men, it's quite intimate, shall we say. The S2000 is a lounge by comparison, and that's actually quite a small car. I really want to try some more Esprits, and I'd love to have another go at an XL. I feel like the XL and I also have some unfinished business. It's a really great car. I actually quite enjoyed that, but at the time I owned it, I didn't have the money to do the things to it that it really needed. So I always felt like I didn't do the right thing by that car. If you're watching this as a review of the Sport 160, I'm afraid there's not much I can really tell you beyond the sort of blindingly obvious. It's great handling, it's not got much space in it. Actually, when it's well kept, it's really quite nice, feelsome. Brakes certainly a weak point. Engine actually really quite good. This one's still on its original head gasket, so they don't all fail. Lotus owners, I think, are a little bit more mechanically sympathetic than MGZR owners, so these always tended to do a bit better on that front. They love wobbling my cameras about. This one needs readjustment all the time because there's so much vibration coming through the windscreen. But if you're thinking about buying one of these, do it. And if you can't afford the Sport 160, don't worry, because the rest of them are brilliant too. Jesus, those brakes are really wooden. They're quite terrifying, actually. The engine also doesn't have the appetite for revs that you might expect of it. It gets sort of 5,000, it's a bit disinterested? Well, the brakes do eventually stop you, but the amount of pressure required is far more than you would deem reasonable. There are many cars out there with a reputation, be it good or bad. The Lotus is certainly no exception. I would say they've got reputations perhaps in equal parts for being somewhat dubious on their build quality, but also in delivering some of the finest driver's cars you'll ever know. And I would say in some cases their reputation for a slightly duff build is not entirely deserved, but still partly. The legend they have constructed as one of the best ways to get from A to B with the biggest smile on your face is absolutely 100% hard-earned and something they definitely deserve. Customers of the new Emira, I think many of them are going to be first time to the brand. And as I know that it's more or less based on the Evora chassis, a car which still has some of Lotus's finest traits, I am so looking forward to speaking to all the many people that get their first go of that car and suddenly, like I did 5 years ago, get to see the light of what Lotus is really all about. To me, it's not lightweight and all that stuff. It's feel, it's feedback, it's interaction, and it's fun. The Emira may be a few kilos heavier than everybody would like it to be, but then I'm sure Mike Tyson's also not quite as trim as he once was. Still take your head off though. That I think is enough from me for today. Hope you've enjoyed this little video. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.